Welcome back to Digging into the Bible. This week we're taking a look at chapter 14 of Genesis, picking up on the continuing story of Abram and Lot. The two of them have divided the land. They had too much livestock amongst themselves. They had too many herdsmen. They were starting to fight with each other. And Abram wisely says, look, we're kinsmen. We can't have that. So they've separated. There was some hints of trouble coming. So now we're going to get into the fun of it. Chapter 14, in the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elazar, Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of Golim. These kings were at war with Bera, king of Sodom, Birsha, king of Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Admah, Shemeber, king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar. And all these joined forces in the land of Siddim, that is the Salt Sea. 12 years they had served Chedorlaomer, but in the 13th year they rebelled. And in the 14th year, Chedorlaomer and the kings who were with him came and defeated Rephaim in Ashtaroth Karanaim, and Zuzim in Ham, and Emim in Shiva Kiriath, and the Horites in their hill country of Seir, as far as El Paran, of the border of the wilderness. And then they turned back and came to En Mitzvah, that is Kadesh, and defeated all of the country of the Amalekites, and also the Amorites who were dwelling in Hazazon Tamar. Wow, that was a mouthful. So there's battle taking place. There's multiple kings in the area, and they're fighting amongst themselves. This is the area into which Abram and Lot have found themselves. Then the king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah, the king of Admah, and the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar, went out, and they joined the battle in the valley of Siddim with Chedorlaomer, the king of Elam, Tidal, the king of Golim, Amraphel, king of Shinar, and Arioch, king of Elasar, 4 kings against 5. Now the valley of Siddim was full of bitumen pits, and as the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled, some fell into them, and the rest fled in the hill country. So the enemy took all of the possessions of Sodom and Gomorrah and all of their provisions and went their way. They also took Lot, the son of Abram's brother, who was dwelling in Sodom, and his possessions, and went their way. So this is a lesser known little story. We think about Lot getting himself into trouble, and if you are familiar with Genesis, you're thinking ahead to things that were not quite there yet. But here Lot is already getting himself into trouble. And it's just by, again, it's proximity to where the battle is taking place. So he's a part of this simply because he's nearby and he's captured. Then one who had escaped came and told Abram the Hebrew, who was living by the oaks of Mamre, the Amorite, brother of Eshcol and Aner. These were allies of Abram. When Abram heard that his kinsman had been taken captive, he led forth his trained men born in his house, 318 of them. Remember when we talked about last time the growing wealth of Abram? He can field his own small army. That's kind of what we're finding out here. And when we're talking about armies in this time, we're not talking about massive multiple thousands of people, that we didn't have the kind of nation state. We had tribal type things that were starting to develop. And so putting 318 men to the field at this time was worth it. When you're talking about the king of this and the king of that, you're not talking about king of thousands or millions. You're probably talking about a kings of a couple hundred. So it's a much smaller scale than you might have in your heads. And went in pursuit as far as Dan. And he divided his forces against them by night, he and his servants, and defeated them and pursued them to Hobah, north of Damascus. Then he brought back all the possessions, and also brought back his kinsman Lot with his possessions and the women and the people. So Abram takes his men, and they go out and they rescue Lot and his family and the people around him. It's kind of an interesting story. Really kind of random, really kind of out there. The interesting one, and I'm just going to kind of notice this, this name of Dan is a marker for the location that is meaningful for the people who read Genesis after Moses has written it, but it would not have been meaningful to Abram. See, Dan is a descendant of his. You don't have a land named after a descendant before, well, the descendant exists. Uh, so what you have is kind of this moment where Moses is identifying where this is, and he's using a marker for the land and a name for the area where the tribe of Dan would eventually settle, but we're years away from that. So here we are. We've got this interesting little story. You've got the battle, and Lot gets caught up in it. But Abram, again, the wealth of Abram comes to the rescue that he has enough men to go and to rescue him. So we got that little story at the beginning of chapter 14. We're going to pause here and come back to the next story in continuing in Genesis chapter 14 next week, where we're introduced to Melchizedek.